It's just that we're wearing a headpiece and there's a microphone in front of us.
Yes. The barriers.
All right.
Can start anytime.
Oh, is it recording already? Oh, okay. Well, first off, I think our topic for today is perfect for our first episode.
Are we starting?
Yeah, it's recording.
Oh, okay.
No, but we can edit some stuff out, right? I think our topic for today, as presented by Lana, is perfect for our first episode. By the way, let me just introduce all the people in the room today. There's Lana, my co-host. There's myself, I'm Victor, and our sound engineer is Warren. And this is going to be our pilot episode. And the reason I say that our topic for today is perfect for our first episode is because we're talking about the idea of belonging and identity. And why is that perfect for our first episode? Because it's all about identity. You know, we're trying to establish our identity for this podcast. What kind of podcast this will be, what will be the theme of our future podcasts, what do we want to talk about.
Right.
So it's perfect. But Lana, why did you decide to talk about belonging and identity for this show?
Well, I guess I always had issues with belonging because I grew up in the U.S. and then I lived in a few countries, and it's a constant change. So I never had like a place that I would call home. You know, perhaps I would call my country my home, but then when I'm there, I feel like an alien as well.
So this would be a perfect time to maybe give
kind
a little
of discuss
background.
that.
Yeah, as I understand it, Lana is Croatian, but she grew up in several countries.
Yes, I mainly grew up in the U.S. in Maryland. It's a state right next to Washington D.C. And then from there, I went to Kosovo, and then back to Croatia, and then to the U.K., Belgium.
So why are you all over the place?
Well, my mom is a diplomat, so I was just following her along her work. Yes, and I believe you also grew up in internationally.
I mean, I'm Taiwanese, but when I was 6 years old, my dad moved us to another country. He started a business in the Philippines, and we lived there for 18 years.
Wow, 18
Yeah,
years.
and in between that, we would travel back and forth between Taiwan and the Philippines.
Yeah.
And then, my dad eventually moved to China, and we would visit, China and different places as well. And I eventually ended up studying in the Netherlands, and now I'm back in Taiwan again.
Yeah. Which city in the Netherlands?
Groningen.
Groningen.
Yeah, all the way up north.
Yes and no, yeah.
So I think it's quite multicultural in the sense that more and more people that I meet in life are just growing up all over the place, right?
Yeah.
It's not just one place anymore.
Yes.
Yeah, but that also leads to some kind of anxiety and crisis when it comes to identity.
Yeah, and also establishing like a base.
Yeah.
Or what your home is, your friend circles, because my friend circles change depending where I am. In fact, I have more friends here than in my own country.
That's interesting.
So I think the country that I feel the most estranged to is my own, which is really
it's
sad.
weird, isn't it?
No, it's sad. And I don't want it to be like that, but it is.
Yeah.
And I tried to fit in Croatia when I lived. I did a few years of university in Zagreb, and I tried to, make friends with the locals with my own. And I just ended up hanging out with Italians and other nationalities. I feel very rejected from my own country, even though I love it very much.
Well, just as a sidebar, even our sound engineer, Warren, who's really not on the mic right now, but I mean, he's got a multicultural background. He moved from Hong Kong. Now he's here in Taiwan. In between that, he traveled to different places. He was in Australia for a while. The reason why I feel we should be talking about identity and different sense of belongingness in this modern age is because I hope that this podcast would be relevant to some younger listeners out there,
Sure.
or some people who are struggling with their own sense of identity. I remember this quote from one of my dorm mates back when I was in the Netherlands. We were talking about another German dorm mate of ours
Yes.
and how we were so jealous that they were so sure of their Germanness.
Ah.
In a sense, in the sense that, in a way, it's worth envying that they're so sure about their identity, about their viewpoint on how they perceive the world.
Yeah.
It's comforting in a way that they don't have to really think too much. They just adopt a certain paradigm and just go with it.
Right, right.
In a way, it's worth envying that they don't really have to ask very deep questions about, where they belong
yes.
or what are their values.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I realized that most people that I know in life struggle with this issue, including us, for example.
Right, right. But on that line, I also envy people who have had a simple,
Right. Yeah.
upbringing, same circle of friends. You're a part of community, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know. But at the same time, I'm very happy with my circumstances.
Right.
There are a lot of challenges. Not everyone can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
I know my mom's colleagues' kids. Some of them, they either handle it really well moving abroad all the time, or they handle it so badly that they go back home and they never want to leave the
Right.
country and are just depressed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that I embraced that lifestyle. In fact, one could even say I'm more addicted to that kind of lifestyle than living in one place for an extended period of time. I think that's what brings me even more anxiety than
Right.
I want to have options
Right.
to go wherever I want.
I also noticed
Yeah.
how whenever I would move to a different place, there would be pockets of micro culture or micro communities within a community. For
Right.
example, when I was in the Philippines, I met a group of classmates back in university that they were devout Christians,
Yes.
and they had their own school in another part of town,
Mm-hmm.
and they all came from that school. And they have their own thing going on. It was a very close-knit community where the school was the center of all their activities.
Okay.
All the parents knew each other. They all did their groceries together. So I just noticed how it's interesting that even when you move to different places, there would be micro pockets
Right.
of different communities within a
Yeah.
community, right? Did you find that as well when you were, say,
Um,
living in different parts of the world?
I mean, it depends how big a city would be. When I lived in Belgium, yeah, for sure, in Brussels, here as well, you can find so many little pockets of people. But in my own country, well, maybe in Zagreb, the capital city, you could find those pockets of people. But if you move anywhere else, it's mostly concentrated to, just Croatians. So when I lived in England, actually, I was in a relationship with an English guy, and it was just English people around us all the time, and I didn't
right.
like it at all.
Right.
I thought, oh, okay, it's English, so it will be nice because I feel speaking English is the easiest. But no, I actually didn't really like hanging out with them at all. It was like hanging out with Croatians that never left the country. So it's I love when everybody's from everywhere. I feel like that's my most comforting environment.
I think we do the same thing too. Like, for example, when Warren came to Taiwan, he naturally also tried to seek out other people from Hong Kong.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. And then other friends of ours who, for example, I have a friend who's Taiwanese,
Yeah.
married a Norwegian.
Uh-huh.
Now, they recently moved back to Norway.
Okay.
And when she got there, she also naturally just sought out other Taiwanese
Right,
families
right.
if she could find some, right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Well,
so far
yeah.
away.
Speaking of that, you're not going to believe this. I
Yeah.
met a Taiwanese girl last weekend
Uh-huh.
who is married to a Croatian guy.
Really?
Yeah, like your sister.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is a sidebar. Would
Yes.
you, how Lana and I met was at my sister's wedding. My
Yeah.
sister was, she got married was it last year?
Yeah.
And her husband is Croatian.
Yes.
and Lana was a guest at my sister's wedding.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we got a chance to talk,
Uh-huh.
Lana told me that she was coming to Taiwan for studies.
Yes.
And that's
I was
how
trying
we
to make friends with all the
right,
Taiwanese.
right. But I think that's a survival skill right there. When you know you're about to move somewhere,
Right.
right? You want to get as many allies on your side as you can.
I mean, every time I moved somewhere, it was mostly, especially after I turned 18, I was moving alone. I wasn't with my mom. So I would just go to a country like the UK, and I would just, just be by myself. I showed up at the airport, and I was like,
Right.
okay, I know where to go, and I'll just make friends, blah, blah, blah. It's not a hard task for me. So people were like, oh, what are you going to do in Taiwan? It's so far away. You don't know anyone. Well, you get to know people, and
Right.
I have no issue doing that. So
That's a life skill that you picked up.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not easy because I used to assume that it was easy for people to do what I did, which is adapt to a new place.
Right.
And it turns out that it's not the case for everyone. Some people have a really
Yes,
hard
I
time.
heard that too.
Yeah, adapting when they move to a new country.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the things that I'm grateful for, one of the life skills that I picked up. This is a good tangent to talk about what are some of the positives
Right.
of our kind of lifestyle or our upbringing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned some
I guess resilience is one of them.
resilience.
Resilience
Yeah.
to change,
Right,
to perhaps challenges.
right. But it gets lonely, doesn't it?
But I don't know. I don't mind.
Oh, you're because you're an introvert?
No, I mean, I have like periods of time where I'm extremely extroverted, and then I have periods where I just don't want to interact with anyone, and
Right.
I can read. I can have time for myself. I actually really enjoy being alone.
Right. So aside from resilience, what else do you
Yeah.
think we picked up along the way?
I don't know. Would you consider yourself very social?
I can be.
Yeah.
But here's the funny thing, though. It's almost like I'm being social when I have to be because I'm in a situation where it helps that I'm social,
Right.
but actually I'm not. So I think that's also a skill that I picked up
Yeah.
because you can't just go somewhere and not have a new community that you can build on. So you
Yes.
have to be social.
Yeah. I mean, but I kind of enjoy it, don't you?
Well-
No, you don't feel that way.
Well,
Yeah.
the part where you meet new people and find out
Yeah, yeah.
about their background, yes. But eventually, I don't know, this sounds so negative, but I also realize a lot of people suck.
That is very true. But that's why you filter it out. You
That's
meet so
true.
many people, and then you kind of filter them.
Yeah, but
That sounds really cruel, actually.
yeah, but I think it also helps when you meet people when you go to a new place because even practical things like opening a bank account,
Yes.
for example, or
that is a
applying for
pain.
a phone.
Yeah, that is.
Just little things in life that makes life, right?
Yes,
And
renting
you
a
need-
place.
Yeah, you need people who know how to do those
Yeah,
things in a
that
new
is
country
true.
that you've been to.
Yeah.
I find that very helpful.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
And of course, we try to reciprocate. And we don't just want to come across as we're using people, right?
Right.
We want to reciprocate where we can.
Yeah,
Maybe
that is true.
perhaps cook a dinner for someone
Yeah.
or invite them over to our place,
Right.
right? But also at the same time, a lot of people fall by the wayside. Like you said, you filter them out.
Yeah.
In the beginning, maybe I would meet 10 people.
Yes.
Towards the end of the year, I'd probably be hanging out with one or two of them.
Yeah,
only.
same.
Yeah.
I was hanging out with 30 people when I first came here. Like, it was constant social events. We even went to Ludao, right? Together, 15 of us, right?
Right.
And then at the end, now I just hang out with like 2 of them.
Right. Another thing that is pretty sad, though, is I remember saying goodbye to so many friends
That's true.
and just classmates because people come from everywhere, right? So usually if you're abroad for studies,
Yeah.
eventually people go home. And those bonds that you've built, and eventually you have to say goodbye to them. It got to a point where I got so sick of saying goodbye to people.
Right.
I kept sending people to the train station and having to wave goodbye to them.
Yeah.
That eventually I just decided not to go because I got so sick of it.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you handle, I don't know, would you say you avoid making too close of a bond because you know it will not last forever?
Well, there is some of that, if
Yeah.
I'm honest. Yeah. Because you don't want to get hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you...
So you're very careful.
Right. Because you invest a lot of emotional
Yeah.
energy into building bonds with people. You don't want it to just go nowhere.
Right.
Or also, I noticed that people that I thought that I was close with, eventually when they went home, we made an effort to try to stay in touch, send emails.
Right.
Back in those days, kids, it was just emails.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
not like today where we all have a smartphone where you
Yeah.
could just pick it up and, just send messages, right? It was
But
all
I
emails.
think because it is so simple now that people engage less in it.
Kind of take it for granted.
Yeah,
right?
because what am I supposed to talk about with someone who lives, I don't know, in Europe at the moment?
Yeah, that's true.
Unless I'm coming to that country and I want to meet up or I'm inviting them.
Yeah.
I don't really see, now this sounds a little bit cruel again, but I don't know.
Can I just interject something here?
Sure.
You made a really good point. You say it sounds cruel, but I feel like this is something that we can really dive into. Part of, growing up in this kind of situation is you learn to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And there are times when it seems to the outside that we're being cruel or that we're so cold.
Yeah.
But it's because A, we've been hurt before,
Yeah.
and B, you simply can't invest that kind of warm, kind of emotional bond with everyone
Yeah.
because it's just not possible,
Right.
right? Because you only have so much time,
Yeah, yeah.
and you really have to select who you give that attention to,
Right.
right? So I think it's very interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, perhaps I used the wrong word. And maybe
No, I think it's perfect. What are you talking about?
Cruel. But I think this goes into the same bracket as resilience. So yeah, you're kind of not too invested, but still friendly.
Yeah.
But there's some friendships I have, for life.
Yeah, but the key is to, filter out
Right.
those that you really eventually might want to keep having a relationship with in the long term, even after the whole thing is over, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, communication is becoming easier with technology, right? So I suppose if both parties want to make that effort.
That's true.
Yeah, but that's the rub, isn't it? Like both sides will need to keep that up because eventually it just kind of dies down.
Right. Yeah,
right?
It does.
Yeah.
And it depends what kind of relationship is it,
Romantic relationships.
Yeah, or is it a friendship?
Friendship, right.
I feel like with a friendship, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
You can, I still have I would consider my best friend from childhood. We haven't lived in the same country for 10 years now, but every birthday or an event, we catch up, and I still feel like, we're very close, even though we don't chat on a daily basis.
Yeah, I feel that that's true. With friends you're really close with, sometimes you don't have to chat all the time.
Yeah.
But you pick up from where you left off
Exactly.
the moment you do talk,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the chemistry of friendship, I guess.
Right. But what about romantic relationships?
Romantic,
for a little background, I'm married, so that's out of discussion. But Lana here is still blessedly single. So she can go into depth about this.
Well, since I move a lot of people I've met, they are not willing to do long distance. I'm a big believer in long distance, actually, because, I'm busy with my life, and I would hope my partner or, somebody I'm interested in is also busy with theirs, that we don't need to constantly see each other.
Right.
But if there is a strong enough bond, I believe long distance is wonderful, actually.
Right.
You don't need to be in each other's faces all the time, and I have my own passions, and I hope they do too.
That is very modern.
So, yeah.
I realize that not everyone would be able to
in fact, most
accept
of
that.
why I have been single for 4 years is probably because, I come to a country, I meet someone, then I leave, and it's usually it's they don't want to do long distance, but then I'm just thinking, it was probably never really a strong bond in the first place, so maybe it's a good thing that it never worked out.
Because what you said sounds very sensible and practical on one level.
Yeah.
But I'm amazed at how many people are now willing to accept that.
That's true. Yeah,
right?
that
It's
is
strange.
very true.
Because if you think about it, it does sound pretty sensible that we can have a deep, loving relationship, but we don't have to be in each other's faces all the time. But apparently, a lot of people just find that unacceptable. Like, no, we have to be together physically in the same place.
Yeah, I think that might come from. I think if the bond is truly there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you really, you know, because I think it's extremely rare to find someone.
That's true, even
that
under the
in
best circumstances,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
It's really hard, but if you do, honestly, you could live on the moon.
Right.
I am okay with that
Right.
because I think it's so rare to find someone that you know that you really get along with
Yeah.
in
I mean,
every
it
way.
transcends the physical
Exactly.
space.
So I believe, you know, when it didn't work out with guys who would say, "Oh, long distance not for me," well, clearly, you know,
Maybe
we
that
didn't
wasn't
have a strong enough
right,
bond
the
in the first
relationship you were
place, and it's a
expecting.
good thing. Yeah.
Wow. So far, we've covered a lot of
Topics.
the drawbacks. No, the drawbacts of
Drawbacks.
of having a multicultural life experience. But I think we should talk more
Positives.
about the positives. But it
Well,
seems,
resilience.
it seems like we keep going back to that. But we really should, you know, for our listeners, try to come up with more positive things to say, and not just the drawbacks. Right?
Okay, well, you definitely learn another language perfectly.
Yeah, that's true.
For example, I started with Croatian, and when I moved to the U.S., I didn't speak. I mean, my English was horrendous, and I didn't speak for like 3 years at all. I think people thought I was mute.
Wow.
I mean, I understood everything. It's kind of like Chinese now. I understand a lot of things, but I still can't really speak unless, you know, I'm in a situation where I must speak and
Right.
nobody speaks around me, so I
Right.
have to do it, you know.
Ah,
You have to, like, if you throw me in, like, because I also speak French, right? And I refuse to speak French with somebody who's French if they speak English. But if you throw me in a village somewhere in the middle of
And you
France,
have to.
and I will have that conversation. And, like, I will do it.
but here's an interesting question, though. I mean, what language do you think in?
Oh, definitely English, but also in Croatian.
So it's
And-
again, it's interesting, right? It's like
yeah.
a mix.
What
of,
do you? What would you say your English is? Your
When I got
problem?
asked
Yeah.
that question before, I really had to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
Because upon reflection, I think in English and Chinese.
Yes.
So I've come over the years. I've just come to accept that that's who I am. Because I would really like to say, oh, I just think in English, or I think in Chinese. So
Yeah.
because you're very sure about your identity. Like I'm at core a
Yes.
Chinese-speaking person.
Right.
Therefore, I think that way. Or I'm an English-speaking person, so
Yeah.
I think that way. But I realized that that's just not who I am. I think in two languages.
Right.
And that kind of makes me unique. But at the same time, not a lot of people can identify
Yes.
precisely what I'm going through.
Yeah, it's also like dreams.
Exactly.
Sometimes when my French was even like it was much better, I would just start thinking like my dreams in French, and it would depend who I speak to.
Right.
Really. So I don't know. Maybe one day I'll be dreaming in
Well,
Chinese.
the only people who can relate to me at that level are actually my siblings because
Oh,
they grew up in the
yes.
same background, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we would be arguing, and we'd be
Yes.
arguing in 3 to 4 languages.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and we would switch back and forth.
Actually, that reminds me of when I babysat these kids in the U.S. Their dad was a French diplomat, and the mom was Japanese,
Oh.
and they were two pairs of twins, all
Right.
girls,
Right.
and they lived in Germany before. So they would argue in German. They would speak in French, and then
Wow.
for sweet situations or like during bedtime, they would speak Japanese.
Aw,
And then
so
and they just
adorable.
came to the U.S.
Right.
So they didn't really speak English. So I would speak to them in French at the time.
Ah.
Yeah. So that was a very actually I was I'm really jealous of people who have like a partner that's from another country,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a child, and they usually are perfect in both languages.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Also, it's a source of pride, believe it or not. I noticed
Yes.
when you're seemingly from a multicultural background,
yeah.
if, say, you're a mixed
Yeah,
baby,
mixed,
if your
yeah.
parents are from different countries,
Yes.
it's a source of pride for some people. I know for myself, I can't completely identify with that because both
Yeah,
my
me
parents are
neither.
Taiwanese.
Yeah.
But I have known people in my life who are mixed babies.
Right.
And whenever they would stay at a certain country, it almost feels to them like they're, how do I phrase this correctly without sounding like they're being racist? They feel like not superior, but they feel they're in a different playing field.
Really, that's your experience.
Yeah, from the people that I've met.
Okay.
Actually, some of
Yeah.
them were kids of diplomats too.
Yeah.
So whenever they would, because they would move around so much,
Right,
right?
right.
Or even army brats, for example.
yeah,
I had
that's
friends
true.
who are army brats from the U.S. They
Yes.
would move to Japan, they would move to the
Yeah.
Philippines or whatever, and then they would feel like the rules apply to them, but they also operate on a different set of rules that's different from their host country.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, they can identify as both at the end of the day.
Yeah, but more so that they feel they try to engage the locals, quote unquote locals, but at the same time, they know that at the end of the
They're
day,
not.
they have to go
Yeah.
back to their group of people.
Yes.
And that group of people is usually other kids from mixed backgrounds.
Right.
So it's almost a sense of they're not the usual kind of people.
Right.
And that gives them a source of pride,
Uh-huh.
almost. Like they know on some level they have experiences that
Yes.
the locals don't have.
But like what you're saying from the mixed backgrounds, there's also an opposite effect. And I've talked to some here who are half European, half Taiwanese, and it's lack of sense of belonging in, I don't know, Germany. For example, I have a friend, and she would, she's half, so sometimes people would be like, "Oh, your German is so good," but she is German. You know? Or I know a friend of mine would also speak about the difficulties that he doesn't know where he belongs.
Right.
Like because he is half. But I don't know. I think it depends in which way you approach it. So I think it can be a positive or a negative.
Yeah. My only wish for people or even younger people out there who are going through the same thing that we're going through is that hopefully they find a community that they can belong with.
Right.
Because I think when you're isolated, that's where most of the negative experiences come from.
When you're isolated.
Yeah, like for example, say you move to a new country with your family.
Yes.
You have a hard time integrating or finding your
Yeah.
people, a group of people you can belong to,
Right.
belong with, do stuff with,
Yeah.
just hang out.
Yeah.
That leads to a lot of depression. That leads to a lot of people feeling lost.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So I think what I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, to which country you move to or what your background is, as mixed as it is, as long as you find a good set of people who are going to be your pillar.
Yes,
your
and accept
rock.
you as well.
Accept you and, help you along. I
Yeah.
think that's really the most important thing because you can come from a background where you're not multicultural or
Yeah.
mixed, but as long as you don't have that sense of community where you live, that can lead to a very isolated and lonely kind of existence.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. So my point, I guess, is, the effort that one should be making is really try to find this group,
Right.
friends who really do care about you.
Yes, and
right?
sometimes it's really hard to find that group.
That is everyone's
Yeah.
challenge, isn't
and
it?
I only experienced this once, and it was when I moved back to Croatia. Was when I was really lonely.
Wow.
I didn't. I mean, when I did try to hang out with the locals, I just feel like they didn't view me like a
Yeah.
local, even though I spoke the language and
Right.
everything. And then, actually, my biggest fear is just going home.
Right.
Like going back to my
That's-
home country. I
don't know if that sounds sad or.
I know it's I don't know if it's I mean it probably is a little bit, but like what keeps me up at night, for example, what kind of
Wow.
a job will I have?
Yeah, speaking of
how will
that.
I go back home?
All right, let's get into that.
Yeah.
Like, this is one of the things we
Job.
wanted to talk
Yeah.
about, right? So, for a career, for a
Yes.
job, what do you do, right?
What do you do?
What do you do? It's
Well-
hard.
Yeah, well, I don't know. When you studied law. You studied
Yeah,
law
international
in the
law.
Netherlands.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And from there, where did you start working?
Well, we all start out with a plan,
Yes.
and then you realize that life changes too quickly for most of those plans to come to fruition, right? And you have to adjust
Right.
accordingly. My plan back then was to finish my degree, hopefully find a job that I can do there
Right.
with my degree. But then the harsh reality came in, and I realized that, in fact, the opportunities for people coming from Asia for my particular field was very limited.
So you wanted to stay in Europe.
For example, I wanted to work for a think tank, or I
Right.
wanted to work for an international organization,
Yeah.
or maybe even an NGO.
Yeah.
But then I realized that the priorities of people in Europe are a little different. They wanted to hire people from their own country or within the EU. And then if
Yes.
there's something left over, they might hire somebody from elsewhere.
And did you know there's a stage before that in the EU? There's also stage O, specific EU countries.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's also a struggle I had.
Also,
when
they
I
try
finished.
to tick certain boxes. For example, they have
is
to hire
true.
X number of
Yeah.
minorities or
Yeah.
women, and I think that's all that's well and good. Except that when it comes down to me,
Yes.
a lot of the opportunities shrink up.
Yeah, I know it doesn't benefit
Right,
you.
right.
Yeah.
So as much as I wanted to stay,
Yeah.
all I could do was come back home.
Yeah.
But then when I came back home, it was really tough, like you just mentioned a while ago,
Exactly,
because you
yeah.
feel kind of lost.
Yeah.
Because people don't really understand you,
No.
and you feel you don't really completely belong, right?
Mm.
And then when I worked for a very typical Taiwanese company, it was a real struggle.
Really?
It was
what kind
hell.
of company was it?
I'd rather not name names.
Okay. No, I mean like what kind of industry, or was it a business? Was it
In
like
Taiwan,
think tank?
most companies are related to tech.
Tech? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So let's say even if
Yeah,
you took
yeah.
marketing
Okay,
or art,
okay, yeah.
eventually you get sucked into tech.
Yeah.
It's all one way or another. All roads lead to tech.
Right.
And the company culture
Yes.
can vary from company to company, obviously.
Yeah,
but in general, there is a Taiwanese work culture,
Right.
and I had a hard time integrating it.
What would you describe a Taiwanese work culture?
A Taiwanese work culture is one that's very much based on hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's East Asian in general.
Yeah,
that
it's like
way.
Koreans,
yeah.
Japanese.
Yeah.
Of course, the culture is changing. I think more and more companies are trying to veer away from that because they're trying to attract younger people to come work for them, right?
Okay.
Because young people don't buy
don't
that
want
anymore.
that,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's not what they want. But when I was in, the working environment, when I was in the workforce,
Right.
that's what I was facing. I had
Yes.
to face with a lot of hierarchy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of structure and unspoken rules that
Right.
we don't know about because we didn't grow
yeah,
up
yeah,
here.
Yeah.
That was really hard.
And what about like talking back to your superiors? I guess that's not.
It was
really-
mixed. Like by the time I was working, there were some of my colleagues who
Yeah.
were more outspoken, and some were more traditional.
Okay.
I'll give you an example. One of the companies that I worked for, our boss, the big boss of the company, actually required all of us
Yes.
to go and burn some incense on a certain festival.
Okay.
And that's a big no-no in
Yeah,
Western
yeah.
countries. Like, well, maybe I'm from a different
Yes,
religious
yes.
background. Why are you forcing me to
Yeah,
do that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it wasn't that he was forcing us, but it was kind of expected.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't spoken out loud, but it was kind of expected that you
Right.
should go burn that incense,
Yeah.
offer up some things. And in fact, he would be handing out red envelopes to everyone who did it.
Oh,
It was very
only
traditional.
to the people who
Yeah,
did it.
who
Oh,
burned those
okay.
incense.
Yeah.
So it was expected for you to do it. And it was
Right.
expected for him to hand you a red envelope.
Ah.
And this is a big ass company that I'm talking about.
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
a
yeah. It's
family-run
yeah,
business.
yeah,
This is a
okay,
big
yeah,
company.
I get it. Mm-hmm.
Employing thousands of people.
Yes.
So it's just things like that. And
Okay.
when I tried looking for international companies within Taiwan, at
Mm-hmm.
least, it was hard because a lot of multinationals left the country by then. They all either moved to Hong Kong, Singapore,
Right.
or Shanghai.
Yeah.
And so opportunities for being employed in a multinational company were drying up too.
Ah, okay. But do
Yeah.
you think that is increasing now here in Taiwan?
Well, the landscape's changing
Yeah,
again.
the landscape is changing.
But I think pretty much still about the same.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Okay.
opportunities are not what it used to be.
Mm.
So, but what about you, for example? Because we're in a different time in our lives. I'm in my
Sure.
40s. You're in
I'm
your 20s.
26.
So, what are your challenges?
I mean, when I finished my master's degree, I really wanted to work for a European think tank, right? Somewhere where I could speak English, somewhere where I could focus on my expertise, which I thought were, my expertise, what I studied. And it was China's Belt and Road Initiative and its impact in Europe. But I also focused on Serbia as a security threat in the European Union. So I'm part of think tanks right now. It's just that I'm doing it for fun rather than for getting the money. But I always wanted to work. I need to work in something that I love because if I don't love it, I will not do it. So I mean, my ultimate dream is to open my own think tank in
Right,
Croatia,
right.
right? But I've been rejected a lot in Europe, and as you said, you thought doors were closed for you in Europe a lot. And doors are actually closed for small countries too in Europe, especially Croatia. I mean, we're a country of 3.8 million. But if you're in Brussels or in Paris, they're mostly going to pick, French or German nationals or
right.
Dutch or countries that are bigger
Yeah.
in the EU.
That's just the reality
It's
of
just
it,
what
right?
it is.
Yeah.
And it's also unspoken. Nobody says it, but everybody knows that, I- So it's same as if you want to work for the European Union, it's extremely tough. Also, coming from a big country will give you more leverage. You need connections. If somebody can vouch from you from your country that works in the EU, that helps a lot. And Croatians who do work for the EU, they don't really want to vouch for their own people, which is I found a bit strange.
That is a little bit strange.
They don't, yeah. And then NATO, I mean, but then again, I worked for the United Nations for a little bit in Kosovo, and I realized I really don't like these big international companies, or at least not a company, but an organization.
Right.
Because they don't, at the end of the day, they have all these values and all these goals, but they're not allowed to set any policy. They're not allowed to express opinions in any
right.
sort. And just like the EU, they're not allowed to express any opinions.
Which is very frustrating, isn't it?
I mean, European Union diplomats, right?
Yeah.
When they go to different countries, nobody regards them as serious. If you want to talk to a country, you talk to a diplomat from that country, like Germany or Croatia or Slovakia, whatever. But nobody goes to a European Union, External Action Service diplomat and asks a question because they know they're constrained. They can't do anything.
Where does that leave you, though?
Where does that leave me? I mean, I could, I guess, go back to, work for maybe the Croatian government, but then again, my English is better than Croatian, so it will be tough. I think I would be just translating my paragraphs and
which is kind of boring.
Yeah,
in
it
the
is.
end, right?
It is.
Yeah.
But then it's also I'm very opinionated, and
So that could lead to trouble.
so that's a big. I don't know. That's why I like the think tank work.
Right.
Because you can be independent in your thinking, and you can, write about the topics you think are important rather than the government that carries. Now you have to, set out all these things that the government
So essentially
says.
what we're talking about here is idealism versus practicality.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because on the one
I'm
hand,
too much of an
No, but
Yeah.
that's the eternal question, right? You want to find something that ideally has a good balance
yes.
of both.
Yeah.
Because the practical side is you do have to make a living. You have to support yourself.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you do, you got to make enough to start a family, for example.
Sure.
Or, just to pursue a happy life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to lose some of your idealism. This is
Yeah.
the reason why you went into that field in the first place,
Right.
right? You want to feel excited. You want to feel passion from your job.
Yes.
You want to feel like you make a difference. That's such a hard balance to find,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm finding interesting is it's getting hard even for Europe to find that balance. Because in Asia, it's pretty clear cut. Like at least for
Okay.
East Asian countries,
Yes.
we're all about making money.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of the struggles if you say you want to be an artist, you want to
Yeah.
do something in the creative field. Most traditional parents would clamp down on that. They would say,
Yes.
no, you're going to starve to death. Find something more practical. That's always their word.
Yeah.
So what I'm finding interesting is even in Europe, as you describe it,
Uh-huh.
it seems like you're facing the same challenges.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in Europe we're not as discouraged. I mean, we're not as you have to go into these fields, otherwise you won't make any money. I mean, my mom at least, she encourages me to pursue what I love. I mean, even looking at my background as a person in school, I was never an excellent student actually overall. It was mostly the subjects that I loved I excelled in, and those that I didn't I would do very average or bad. like maths.
Right. So
it's
ideally, all
I can't do it.
parents
Yeah.
should be supporting their kids that way.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
ideally, but sometimes, it's not possible.
What I find what's happening here
Yeah.
in Asia is that there's a trend that's starting to shift towards that.
Mm-hmm.
But with all things, change needs time, right?
Right.
It doesn't just happen overnight. But I do see a trend like more and more parents are starting to encourage their kids to pursue other interests and not just all
Yeah.
about making enough money and
Yeah.
supporting yourself. So I see that as a positive thing. But I guess what I'm trying to get at here is it seems that you are left in a conundrum because pursuing your interests, but at the same time,
Yeah.
where do you fit in? Where do you find something in the workplace or
Right.
in the bigger world out there that
Yeah.
you can make a living from? That's a real struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it
That's a
also
real
depends
challenge.
on your personality, I guess. I think some people do okay in big organizations and they enjoy it. They have the job security. They have somebody, I mean, they're carrying out tasks. I wish I was this kind of person, that I would have job security. But I think knowing myself throughout the years now, it's only been 26, I'm still getting to know myself, right?
Yeah.
I realized that I don't like when somebody tells me what to do. In fact,
Right.
I will do everything I can not to do it on purpose.
Right.
If you
Depends
tell me
on
to
your
do it.
personality as well, right?
Yeah, so I can't do it. If
Yeah,
somebody,
yeah.
oh, you must study. I will not study on purpose. you know?
So you're the problem.
So I'm the problem. I feel like I
Just
either
kidding.
have to be, I have to have, ideally, it would be great if I can make money on my own by myself without any interference from somebody telling me what to do or how to do it.
Because the people I know
Yeah.
who are good at just following orders,
Yes.
like first of all, like you said, it's their personality. They have an easier time at
Yes.
it. But secondly, because I'm a little bit older than you are, and the
Uh-huh.
people that I've seen around me who are my age or even older, the people who are good at following rules, tend to live a life that is, at least from my point of view,
Okay.
very uninteresting.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's like, but it's
Yeah.
stable.
No, I mean,
Let's be honest,
I
it's
wish I
very
was
stable.
happy with that.
Right? It's stable, but
Yeah.
not very exciting, not very
yeah.
not very interesting.
Yes.
And it reflects in everything in their lives. Their relationship with their friends, their spouse, their children. They just don't. They're not very interesting.
No.
Yeah. But then they do provide, especially as a man.
Yeah, they're-
if you're a man, you do provide for your loved ones.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you want, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Up to this point, before we close the session,
Yes.
I just want to dive a little bit back into the dating life
Okay, sure.
because this is something that we can only learn from you,
Oh,
who's
me?
a
I
little
don't know.
younger. I guess what I want to know is so we talked a while ago about how if you find someone with the right connection,
Yes.
right values,
Yeah.
a long distance relationship can work, right?
I mean, of course, because, I move around and I don't expect to live in one country forever.
Right. But what about children or starting
Children.
a family?
I think before I would start to think about that, I would have to have, like, a job. Yeah, like
Right,
first
right,
comes
right.
job, then
Right.
comes extras.
Right,
It's
right,
like
You want to be
step by step kind of.
You want to be
system.
stable
I want to
before
be
you
stable.
think about
yeah,
having children.
Yeah, I don't, and also finding the right person. I mean, I'm okay
Right.
with never having children.
Right.
And if I don't, there's also adoption in case I at 40 or something, I'll be like, oh, I want a kid. Okay, there's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not, in a hurry to find someone
All right.
to have kids. That is not at all what I
Very sensible.
want. Yeah. And it's actually one of the reasons my relationship ended. My last one was because the guy wanted to have kids and he wanted it now, and if I went to go study my master's, then he would break up with me. I'm like, okay, well, that's clear to me.
But this is really a challenge for people in your age because this is also why population is tanking everywhere in the
Sure.
world, right? In developed
But
countries.
there's so many people out there. So
Because it's a real issue here in Taiwan.
It is.
You know,
In
the
Croatia too.
Yeah, population is tanking. Japan, Korea,
Yeah, that's
it's the
true.
same thing.
Yeah.
Because it's sensible for young people to, like you said, to
Yeah.
you want to be stable
Yes.
on your own 2 feet before you think about having
Yeah.
a family, which is
Right.
very sensible.
Yeah.
But because of conditions in the world today, that makes population decline a real thing.
Yeah.
it's really going
And
down.
then it's increasing in other places.
So this is going to be
it's-
our next topic, among other things that we can talk about, because there's endless stuff to talk about, right? But I hope we are able to focus a little bit on the core topics today about identity and belongingness, and to, people out there who might be listening to this podcast, we hope we shed some light on, this issue with our own insights. And hopefully if you're suffering from any kind of loneliness or depression because you're not sure of your identity or belongingness, that this podcast might have helped you a little bit.
Well, I recommend reading books. They can be your best friend.
Right.
In fact, yesterday I couldn't even sleep because I'm reading this book about Taiwan, actually.
Reading is good.
Yeah, reading is good because then there's just so much you can learn. And,
Right. So when
know,
you're lonely, what other advice would you give people?
when you're lonely, well, you just go somewhere, go out by yourself. Like I did this when I was traveling alone when I was in Czech Republic. I just went out and then I went to this museum and I met people in the museum. You never know. Just go.
Yeah.
And my friend actually went to Vietnam recently by herself. She had a wonderful time. She was scared a bit at first,
Yeah.
but
Especially as a woman, if you're traveling.
yeah,
by
that is
yourself.
true. That
Yeah.
is true. Just go
Right.
out,
Right.
read a book.
Read a book, go out, meet people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn. I think the more you know, the more you learn,
Yeah.
the happier and more content you will be with yourself.
Right. This is good advice, not even just for people who come from a multinational background, even just for people in general.
Yes,
right?
and never stop learning.
Yeah,
right?
there you
Just
go.
keep on learning. My dad's colleague, who's in his 50s, he actually just started learning Chinese
Oh wow.
in Croatia. Yeah.
What I do when I get lonely is I just find hobbies.
Yeah, hobbies.
Hobbies to
That's
just
it.
occupy
Yeah,
my
go
time.
out, read,
Yeah.
hobbies, learn how to play a new instrument. I always
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
learn how to play, the guzheng.
How about the erhu?
Oh man, I don't know about but or the piano.
Right.
There's just so many things to do, and you can go sailing. I want to go learn how to sail.
Right,
There's
right.
just
So it's important to
a
have
million
this
things to do.
upbeat, optimistic outlook on life. That
Yeah.
helps a lot, right? Because I feel like, irregardless really of your background, the basic issues or problems that everyone faces in the world are the same. We all worry about how to be financially independent.
Yes.
We all worry about good health. We want to have a group of people that we can love and who love us in turn.
Yes.
So like all the aspirations, wants, and needs of everyone in the planet are more or less the same. Like it doesn't matter if, you're multicultural or not. Right?
Yeah.
So for that, I feel like most of these advice would apply for everyone. Just like you said,
Yeah.
find something interesting to do, right? Every time you're feeling down, read a book, go out, meet people. In my case,
Work on yourself. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So in my case, I like hobbies. So
Yes.
I meet people that way.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, that's how you grow and find out more about yourself.
There's an expression in Chinese
Mm-hmm.
called 骑驴找马.
Okay.
So that means ride a donkey until you find a horse.
Ah, yeah, I like that.
It makes a lot of sense. It's very
Yeah, it
deep,
does.
right? In the sense that it's never going to be the right thing the first time around.
Yeah.
But you do have to get on. You have to get on
Try.
something,
Yeah.
right? And start riding until you find the ideal thing.
Yes.
So ride a donkey till you find a horse,
Right.
right? And
Keep
with that,
trying.
I
Yes.
feel like we should
Close
end this
off.
close and call this a day.
Okay.
Right? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Warren, for being our sound engineer.
Thank you, Warren.
I hope that whoever's listening to this would look forward to our next podcast.
Our parents be listening.
Yeah, should we make our parents listen to this? All right. Cheers.
Okay. Bye-bye.